Hello. Today we'll be going over exercise 7.14, contains. The problem reads, write a static method named contains that accepts two arrays of integers, a1 and a2 as parameters, and that returns a Boolean value indicating whether or not a2's sequence of elements appears in a1. True for yes, false for no. The sequence of elements in A2 may appear anywhere in A1, but must appear consecutively and in the same order. For example, if variables called list1 and list2 store the following values, with list1 storing 1, 6, 2, 1, 4, 1, 2, 1, 8, and list2 storing 1, 2, and 1, then the call of contains with parameters list1 and list2 should return true, because list2's sequence of values 1, 2, and 1 is contained in list1 starting at index 5. If list2 had stored the values 2, 1, and 2, the call of contains with parameters list1 and list2 would return false, because list1 does not contain that sequence of values. Any two lists with identical elements are considered to contain each other, so a call such as contains with parameters list1 and list1 should return true. You may assume that both arrays passed to your method will have lengths of at least 1. You may not use any strings to help you solve this problem, nor methods that produce strings, such as arrays.toString. So my solution was to loop through list1. And as I looped through list1, I essentially compared it to every element in list2 and counted the number of similarities there were. And then each time I checked to see if the number of similarities was the same as the length of list2. So let's go ahead and take a look at the example. So if we were to start with our first element, 1, I would compare that with the 1 in list 2 and see, okay, well, we have one similarity there, but we have a difference here. We don't have a similarity here. And again, here we have a difference. So the total number of similarities comes out to 1. So we know the first time that the first three elements of list 1 do not contain the elements of list 2. And then with the for loop, I then move on to 6 to 1 and compare those to 1 to 1 and keep going so forth and so forth with 2, 1, 4, 1, 4, 1, 4, 1, 2, and then 1 to 1. Now you guys will see that once we reach 1 to 1, we will end up with 3 similarities, and because we have 3 similarities and we know that list 2 contains 3 elements, we know that list 1 contains list 2. So let's go ahead and create our method header here. We're going to have public static, and because we will be returning a true or false value, with that value representing whether list 1 contains list 2, we can go ahead and set the return type to Boolean, and we'll name the method contains with 2 parameters, and those 2 parameters will be list 1 and list 2. Alright, now what's our first step? Again, our first step is creating that first for loop, right? That's gonna incrementally check through each value of list 1. So we're going to go ahead for int I equals 0 because we want to start from the beginning. Now, your first instinct might be to go all the way to the end. However, that leaves us with an issue. So if we go back to our example, once we check the last set of 3 elements, which is 2 and 8, the for loop, if we were to go all the way to the end, would constitute that we look at 1 and 8. But the problem with that is list 2 contains 3 elements, not 2. when we're actually looking at two numbers. So we want to stop at a point where list1.length minus list2.length. So in this case, because list2 is 3 elements long, we want to stop at a point where we still have 3 elements left to analyze. So for that reason, we're going to go ahead and go all the way to list2.length. And we're actually going to set this to a less than or equals because we want to be able to analyze that last set of elements. And go ahead and finish out that for loop. Now from here, we're going to go ahead and count those numbers of similarities. So let me go ahead and create a variable called similarities, and we'll go ahead and set that equal to 0. And we'll have our second for loop. And what that second for loop is going to do is it's going to compare each element from list 1 to the elements in list 2. So we have j is equal to 0, j is less than list2.length, right? Because we want to compare each value in list 2. Now we want to increase the variable similarities by 1 whenever the element in list 2 can also be found in list 1. So if the element at list 2 at j, now this is a bit tricky here, is equal to list 1 at I plus j. And the reason for this kind of funky index is because list 1 is constantly changing. So it's not always going to be at these first 3 elements, right? It's that set is going to keep shifting rightwards. All the meanwhile, list 2 is only going to be comparing, in this case, the elements at index 0, 1, and 2, which is why for the element we're looking at for list 1, we add I to the j to just account for that change. And if the two are equal to each other, we're going to go ahead and add to our similarities variable. And finally, at the end, if the number of similarities we found is equal to the length of list 2, right, then we know that list 1 contains list 2, so we can go ahead and return true. And if our code goes through this entire for loop and does not find any, then we're going to go ahead and return false. And once we submit, you'll notice we pass all of our tests.